everyone. We would like to welcome you in this event, which is a night to remember, and I hope that you would also remember our discussion for today, which is about poems and book awards, which will be presented by our group 5, and the presenters are my group mates, which is Miss Pepito, Miss Benya, Mr. Pinto, and yours truly, Miss Poyo, together with Miss Ramos. And here are the topic outlines, or the topics that we'll be discussing on this session, which is about what is poetry, elements of poetry, types of poetry, how to create poetry, significance of poetry, samples of poetry, and what are the major book awards, as well as type of book awards, and sample of winner of book awards. Also, at the end of the lesson, the students are expected and should be able to determine what is the poems and poetry, distinguish various types of poems and poetries, expound the significance of poems and poetries. Okay, so before we proceed in our discussion is that we will be having a game, and I know that you're already aware about what it is. So this is called 4 Pigs 1 Word, and it can be played, of course, or the app. There is the app that you can download and could be played, of course, using your mobile phone, Android phones and such. And that's what we're going to do right now. I will be posting 4 photos, and you will be guessing what is the underlying words behind the photo. So, are you ready? Great, because I am also more than excited to play with you. So, let's get started. Okay, so for our first entry, what do you think is the underlying words hidden in these 4 pictures? We got here a hand with the tattoos, and what do you call this one? A lot of things that is, there is also this printing machine and such. So do you have any idea what it is? Oh, great! So if your answer is ink, you got the right answer, and give yourself a round of applause. Okay, so for the next part, what do you think is the word behind the photos with letters, mind, and a child that is more like teaching, writing something, and a person who is thinking? You have any idea what it is? Okay, so if your answer is reads, means you're correct. So, as for the next part, do you have an idea about what is being flashed on the screen? Very good, excellent. So if your answer is poems, then you're correct. So I hope that you enjoyed our motivation, and we will be starting with our discussion right now to be presented by Miss Maxine Joshly Pepito about what is poetry.
What is poetry? Poetry is a form of literary work that shares a thought or describes anything in a lyrical form of words. So, according to Oxford Languages, poems lend particular intensity to communicating feelings and ideas through a unique style and rhythm. It can either be structure or free form. Free form, we will be discussing that in a short while. And it uses phrases that are descriptive, sensory, and assertive. And aside from that, it is also universal. So what do I mean by the term universal? It means that the author shows a story, it tells a story through a poem that depicts or conveys a message that has a common experience to everyone or to his or her readers. And it has a sincere emotional content. And lastly, of course, children's poetry must contain subjects that are familiar to them, and these contents will enrich their viewpoints and experiences. So that is poetry. So there are actually a variety of types of poetry that I found on the internet. I found a total of 15 of them. These are these are blank verse, where two or more lines of this type of poetry do not rhyme. And then we have the rhyme poetry, which of course from the name itself, it has a chosen rhyme scheme. And then the free verse, we will be also discussing that in a short while. And then we have epics. Epics is a type of poetry that depicts an extraordinary feat and adventure of a subject in a poem. It, and it includes unworldly and supernatural obstacles. So that is epic. And then we have narrative poetry and haiku, which will be discussed as well later on, along with sonnet. Then we have pastoral poetry. Pastoral poetry focuses on the natural world, yeah. And then we have elegies. Elegy is a type of poetry where a poet or a speaker expresses sadness or grief. And then we also have ode. Ode is a type of poetry about praising and glorifying a certain event. And then limerick as well, we'll be discussing that later on. And then lyric poetry. Lyric poetry, it often has a song-like qualities. And then ballad, it is a it's each stanzas of a ballad has four lines, and it follows either A B C B or A B A B rhyme scheme. And then we have soliloquy. Soliloquy is a type of poetry wherein the character in the poem expresses his or her thoughts and feelings. And then lastly, we have villanelle. Villanelle is a three-line stanzas and has a final quatrain. So those are the types of poetry in a general matter. But since we are in the child and adolescent literature, we will be focusing more on the types of poetry that are often used in children's poetry. So these are the types of poetry for children. So these are the poetry that are often used in children's poetry. First, we have haiku, calligram, limerick, narrative, kenning, free verse, and sonnet. So let us first discuss haiku. Let us briefly discuss haiku. Haiku is a three-line poetry that has a total of 17 syllables. So the first line has 5 syllables, and then the second line has 7 syllables, and then the third line has also has 5 syllables. And it doesn't necessarily have to rhyme with each other. So let's take a look at this example here. I got this example randomly from the internet. So let's read it. Butterflies are cool in the big, huge green forest. They fly up so high. So as you can see here, it says here that haiku is a three-line poetry, and as we can see here in the example provided, it is a three-line poem. So let's look at each line. First line has 5 syllables. So let's see if the first line of this poem has 5 syllables. Butterflies are cool. So those are 5 syllables. Next line, second line, 7 syllables in haiku. In the big, huge green forest. So those are 7. And then lastly, the third line, 5 syllables again. They fly up so high. 5 syllables. As you can see, 5, 7, 5, 17 in total. So that is haiku poetry. Then next is the calligram poetry. Calligram poetry is a type of poetry where the words and letters are formed into a particular shape. It does. I don't think it has. I mean, it doesn't have any rules to follow. It doesn't necessarily have to be rhyme as well, as so long as it has a particular shape that is formed. Let's look at this example here. As you can see, this is a poem that was formed in a cat's silhouette, in the shape of a cat silhouette. So that is an example of calligram poetry. Next, we have limerick. Ayan. Limerick is a type of poetry that usually contains humor, and it strictly follows the AABBA rhyme scheme. And I'm pretty sure that most of us are already familiar with the rhyme scheme, or specifically the AABBA rhyme scheme, because it was taught to hum students back in senior high school, and I'm pretty sure that majority of our class are graduates of humanities and social sciences in senior high school. But I will still briefly discuss this through this example. So that's Daddy Limerick. I'll read it. There once was a very sad daddy whose golf game was going quite badly. He looked left and right, no ball was in sight. I think that he needed a caddy. So as you can see here, it says here that limerick follows the AABBA rhyme scheme. So let's look at the first stanza. The first two lines, it ends with daddy and badly. Daddy and badly rhymes with each other, so therefore they are considered AA. And then we also have the second stanza where right and sight. It is a different set of rhyming words, therefore they are B and B. And then last line we have, I think that he needed a caddy. The last word is caddy, and caddy rhymes with the first stanza, which are daddy and badly. So therefore the last line is A as well. So that's AABBA rhyme scheme. That is limerick. Next slide, we have narrative poetry. So I think everyone is very familiar with this. Narrative poetry, of course, it tells a story, it narrates a story, and it includes the elements of a story um, such as the characters, settings, dialogue, climax, and resolution. It tells a story in a very short length of poem. And it often rhymes, but not always. So this is an example of a narrative poetry. As you can see, it tells a story. This is Casey at the Bat by Ernest Lawrence Thayer. So as you can see here, we have the characters right here, and then the dialogue. We have the dialogue right over there, and then we have the settings of time and place. And yeah, that is an example of narrative poetry. Next type of poetry is kenning poetry. By far, this is my favorite type of poetry. Kenning poetry is a type of poetry that replaces a noun with a compound word or expression. So if you don't know what a compound word or expression is, it is a type of word where two different words are used together that will give off a new meaning. So there are two types of compound words. We have the open and closed compounds. So open compound, basically, it is two words that are separated by a space. So example given here are school bus, ice cream, sweet tooth, banana split. And then closed compound, on the other hand, these are words that are compressed together. It can either be with no space, or they can have hyphens in between. So examples are airport, football, butterfly, and mother-in-law. So mother-in-law is an example of hyphenated closed compound. So let's look at the example here. As you can see, the poem here uses a lot of hyphenated closed compound words. So we have a worm eater. What is a worm eater? It is a bird, and as you can see here in the definition of kenning poetry replaces a noun with a compound word. So the word worm eater replaces the word bird. Bird is a noun, and the worm eater is a compound. So okay, let's look at it. A worm eater. What is a worm eater? It is a bird. A nest maker. It's a bird. A cushion filler. A seed muncher. A fish guzzler. A fast flyer. A cat escaper. A tree liver. An acrobatic glider, an adventurous swooper, a tweeting singer. Put this together, and I'm a bird. So you can see here, it uses, again and again, I will say it is, the compound word replaced the noun bird. And I think this is very appropriate for children poetry because, first and foremost, it expands their vocabulary in describing a noun or any object around them. It will help in expanding their vocabulary. Next type of poetry, we have free verse poem. This is what I talked about in the definition. You have the structured and the free form. Free verse poem is an example of free form poetry. So it says here that free verse poetry is a form of poetry that is free from the traditional rules of poetry. So what is the traditional rules of a poetry? We have also what we call the rhyme poetry. And rhyme poetry, where is that? Rhyme poetry says here that each line rhymes. These are poems that have chosen rhyme scheme. They follow a specific structure, specific meter, specific length. They follow specific number of syllables and words per line. Free verse, on the other hand, is free from those rules. Those are the qualities of a rhyme poetry that I mentioned are the traditional rules of a poem, of a poetry. Free verse poem is free from those rules. It doesn't follow any rhyming, meter, length. No, it doesn't follow that. So it says here in the example that free verse poem can tell a story, describe a subject, or explain an emotion. There's no rhyme, but you may find many poetic devices, and lines can be sentences, phrases, or even single words. So as you can see here in the example here, first three lines, this is actually a one sentence in total. The first three lines, it is a sentence, but as you can see in the second line, it was cut into two lines. So the third line is kind of short. It's not a sentence anymore. So it also doesn't have any rhyming word, and it doesn't follow a number of syllables, number of words per line. So it's free from everything. Oh, I read this from my reference. It says there that there is one rule that you always must remember when you are creating or writing down a free verse poem. That rule is that it doesn't have any rule, and you always have to remember that. So that is free verse poetry. Next, I think this is the last. We have sonnet. Okay, there are two classifications of sonnet. We have the Italian, and the English. And since we're in English class, we will be focusing more on English sonnet, which is most commonly known as Shakespearean sonnet. It is a 14-line poem with a fixed rhyme scheme. This rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and G, G. So let's look at the example here. Ayan, this example right here, I'm not gonna read the whole poem because it's quite long, but I will focus on the rhyme scheme. So let's look at the last word of each line. First stanza. Yeah, indebted and wretched, as according to the author. It rhymes, so that's technical. That's basically A and A. And then we have earth and mirth. That's B. There's another set. That's B. So the rhyming scheme for the first stanza is A B A B. Next, the same thing works with the second stanza. However, it has a different set of rhyming words here. So that we will be moving on from the letters A and B, and then we'll be using in the second stanza are the letters C and D. So that's first line aid rhymes with the third line last word laid. So aid and laid are C, and then second line last word own rhymes with the fourth line last word grown. So those words are letter D. So therefore, the second stanza has the rhyme scheme of CD, CD. Next, third stanza, luxuries rhymes with the third line last word worries. So again, third line has a different set of rhyming words. Therefore, we will be moving on from letter C, D, and we will be using letters E and F for the third stanza. So luxuries, the first line in the first stanza is luxuries. Luxuries rhymes with the last word of the third line, which is worries. and then so they are letters E. And then the second line, its last word is rare, and it rhymes with the last word of the last line, which is hair. So rare and hair are letter F. So therefore, the rhyme scheme for the third stanza is E F E F. Last stanza, we have return and earn. Return and earn, again, that's a different set of rhyming words compared to the first three stanzas. So we will be moving on to letters G. And since return and earn rhymes with each other, technically they are both letter G. So, did we follow the fixed rhyme scheme of a sonnet? Yes, we did. This poem followed that fixed rhyme scheme. Sonnet Parents, therefore, Sonnet Parents by Dr. A. Celestine Raj Manohar MD has the A B A B C D C D E F E F G G rhyme scheme. And that is it for the types of poetry for children. The next presenter will be Miss Polio.
Greetings everyone, I am Irish Macy Poyo and I will be discussing what are the samples of poetries. And here are the following samples of poetries. So next slide please. So the first sample of the poetry that we will be discussing is Jabberwocky. And as you all know, Jabberwocky is a poem which is written by Lewis Carroll, which is about the killing of a creature named the Jabberwock. And it was included in his 1871 novel Through the Looking Glass, the sequel of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which is being publicated year 1865. And the book tells of Alice's adventures within the back to front world of Looking the Glass world. Okay, so the next sample of story that I'll be discussing is about the Owl and the Pussycat. Actually, this poem, rather not story, this poem is being, what do you call this one? It also has a lot of version. It also has a song version which you can hear on YouTube. And while doing this search, I kind of feel like, jabbing this song. Anyhow, so moving forward or back to the poem is that The Owl and the Pussycat is a poem by Edward Lear, and this is being first published on year 1870 in the American magazine or Young Folks, and this is on what do you call this one? An illustrated magazine for boys and girls. Also, in the following years, old book nonsense songs, stories, botany, and alphabets. Also, Lear wrote the poem for a 3-year-old girl, Janet Simons, and the daughter of Lear's friend and fellow poet John Addington Simons and his wife Catherine Simons. The term rincible is being used for the phrase rincible spoon, which was being invented for the poem. Another thing is that The Owl and the Pussycat have features for anthropomorphic animals, which is an owl, a cat, a pig, a turkey, and this is what they call this one. This tells a story about love between the title characters who has many in the land where the bong tree grows. Okay, so next slide please. The next sample of the poem that we'll be discussing is about From a Railway Carriage, which is a poem written by Robert Louis Stevenson, and this is being included in his 1885 collection, which is A Child's Garden of Verse. And the poem have been using uses a rhythm to evoke the movement of the train. And another thing is that the rhythm and the syntax have established the speed and acceleration of a railway journey, while the poet looks out the window at a fast-moving array of image outside, and then a boy gathering blackberries or what do you call this one, or brambles, and a tramp standing and gazing, a man with a cart in the road, and a mill, a river, and so on, as you have read the poem. So, another poem that we'll be discussing is about Roald Dahl's A Little Red Riding Hood, which is famous. Yeah, and this is one of Dahl's revolting rhymes, in which his verse have been retelling of classic fairy tales. And this one is particularly good fun, and the author have offered people not to make Little Red Riding Hood of the 19th century fairy tale stories. However, it should be seen as a plucky, resourceful, and brave girl who pulls out a pistol out of her underwear to protect herself from the big bad wolf. And another thing is that this is a European fairy tale about a young girl and a sly wolf, and the origins can be traced back to several pre-17th century European folk tales. And the best known versions, because it has a lot of versions, the versions or the best versions is written by Charles Perrault and Brother Grimm's. Um, the story has been changed also considerably in various retellings and have been subjected to numerous modern adaptations and readings. And there are other names from the story that have emerged through the years, which is entitled the Little Red Scarf, or simply Little Red Riding Hood. And next slide, please. Okay, so this is going to be the last but not the least fun that we're about to discuss, which is entitled Life Doesn't Frighten Me. And Life Doesn't Frighten Me is a children's book that is written by American writer Maya Angelou, and this is originally released in year 1993 by Stewart Duckworth and Chang. And the book is also, what do you call this one, conceived and being edited by Miss Sarah Jane Boyers, which combines a poem which is written by Angelou with an illustrations by American artists, which simply conveys the feeling to create a brave, defiant tale that celebrates courage within each one of us, and young and old people. Also, for the 25th anniversary rather of Life Doesn't Frighten Me was a re-release by Abraham Books in the year 2018. This is a poem about rather overcoming fear and not allowing your fear to master you or to eat you. And Life Doesn't Frighten Me is perfect poem for children if you want to teach children about self-belief and the importance of facing fears. And there are a list of number of things from barking dog as well as to grotesque fairy. And I hope that you have learned something on my part.
Hello everyone, my name is Penya Jorlene and I'm here to report the elements of poetry. Next slide please. So the elements of poetry are the following. It has the sound and rhythm, subject, speaker, figurative language and poetic devices, theme, tone and mood, syntax. Next slide please. So the first one is the structure and form. Poetry comes in a variety of forms, each with its own framework. So for example, is the sonnet form. It has a fixed structure which differs from odes. Another one is the free verse poem. It doesn't have a metrical consistency that a blank verse poem has. Next one is the meter. Meter define pattern found in words. Next slide, please. So next is sound and rhythm. Rhyme refers to the repeated pattern of sound seen in poetry. They are utilized in order to strengthen a pattern or rhyming scheme. The various rhyme system is an important aspect in various poetry genres such as ballads, sonnets, and couplets. Next one is the subject. Subject is the theme or content of poetry that varies depending on the form. The poem subject is what it's about. Um, Example is the sonnet, which deals with love and admiration for one's lover, as well as sadness and separation. Next one is um, there's another example is the Divine Sonnets. Um, it it covers on the devotion to God, enlightenment, and salvation. Also, elegies. Elegies are poems composed in commemoration of someone who has passed away. Pass away. Okay, next slide, please. So the next is the speaker. The speaker is the one who tells the poem. So in poetry, we often mistake the poet for the speaker. But this is not always the case. Poets will sometimes take on the role of an imagined character and create a poem from their point of view. The poetry is typically told from the perspective of a first person or third person uh, speakers. Poets employ the second person point of view to interact directly with their readers. Speaker tends on understanding and allows us to better understand the tone and mode of the poetry. The second one is the figurative language and poetic devices. So, figurative language and poetic devices is to create musical effects, sound elements such as alliteration, assonance, consonance, and onomatopoeia. Next is the it also has the poetic diction. Poetic diction elements are irony, symbolism, and juxtaposition. Also, the metaphor and simile are utilized to create a relationship between the previously unnoticed imagery. Next slide, please. So next is the theme. So theme in literature is the repeating idea or the pervasive thinking. Poetry subjects range from the simple, which are the love, nature, and beauty, and the complicated ones are the death, sympathy, immortality. So understanding the theme allows the reader to determine the poem's essential through the essential message or the poet's motivation for creating the poem. So next is tone and mood. So it is another important part of poetry. It is the vocabulary, the sound, and form employed in a certain piece of poetry. So poetic diction includes the tone or attitude of the poem's speaker, as well as the overall atmosphere of the text. So readers must seek for the poet's choice of words, metaphorical language, and sound devices to discern the speaker's attitude or tone toward the subject. And the mode is related to the text impact on reader. Next slide, please. So the last part of elements is the syntax. So the syntax is the arrangement of words to form meaningful patterns when compared to prose, fiction, and other kinds of literature. Poetry has a particular syntax. Poets use traditional grammar to accentuate keywords, and the goal of using a particular syntax and diction is to generate certain artistic effects such as tone, mood, and rhythm. So next slide, please. So these are the things on how to create poetry. The first thing we need to do is topic. Search for an inspiration such as works of literature, real world events, your life, and nature. Next one is the journal. Create journal where you put all the ideas you want to include in your topic. Third is choose a form. It is crucial that you know what kind of poetry you wanted to write. And fourth is the first line. Begin with something you want and get some inspiration with other literary works. Next slide, please. So for the fifth, add spice. Use metaphor and similes to strike comparisons. Add some literary devices and write from the heart. Six is the closing line. The closing line or last line should input realization or something that will reveal within the poem. Seven, edit. Edit your work. Use adjectives and adverbs. Mix metaphors, abstractions, and stanza breaks. And the last one is enjoy. The most important things to enjoy is enjoy your writing experience, and speak from your heart. That's all my report. Thank you.
Significance of poetry. Poetry supports the development of children's emotional literacy. They can learn to manage and reflect on their emotion, feelings, and behavior through drawing on experiences they hear about in poems shared. Reading poetry helps children about voice, pitch, volume, and inflection. While these are mainly function of speech, they are also incredibly important for the children learning to read. Poetry can teach young readers about speech pattern. We can give them clue to the words on a page. When they write their own poetry, they can give form and significance to a particular event or feelings that was important to them and communicate it to the readers or to the listener. Poetry still dominate other forms of literature, such as a novel, drama, short story, etc. Poetry is taught in school and colleges across the world. The reason is the poetry can tap the emotion of students and their power of imagination. Poetry, the highest form of literature, influences us because it shows different shades of human being. In fact, poetry is one of the most ancient arts and also the product of human imagination. It expresses different feelings such as friendship, love, death, and other human emotions, and is a form of expression. Writing it, our feelings and thoughts in a subject while reading it encourage us to connect and find meaning in our experiences. Poetry can have a positive impact on the social and emotional learning of children. Offer them a new way of thinking about something.
Major Book Awards. First, Floaters by Martin Espada. The National Book Awards are awarded each fall by the National Book Foundation. Other categories include fiction, non-fiction, young people's literature, and the Medal for Distinguished Contribution to the American Letters. The second major book awards is The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida by Shehan Karunatilaka. The Booker Prize for Fiction promotes the finest in literary fiction by rewarding the very best novel of the year. The prize is the world's most important literary award and has the power to transform the fortunes of authors and publishers. The third major book award is Watercliff by Andrea Wong and Jason Chip. The Caldecott Medal is awarded each year to the illustrator of the most distinguished American picture book for children by the Association for Library Service to Children, a division of the American Library Association. Types of book awards. First, poetry. Second, featured award. Third, children's books. Authors who won the major book awards. First, Martin Espada. He is a poet, essayist, translator, editor, and attorney. Martin Espada has dedicated much of his career to the pursuit of social justice, including fighting for human rights, and reclaiming the historical record. His critically acclaimed collection of poetry celebrate and lament the working class experience. Second, Shehan Karuna Tilaka. He was born in Galle, Sri Lanka in 1975. Karuna Tilaka grew up in Colombo, studied in New Zealand and has lived and worked in London, Amsterdam, and Singapore. He currently lives in Sri Lanka. His songs, scripts, and stories have been published in Rolling Stone, GQ, and National Geographic. He has worked as an advertising copywriter and played guitar in a band called Independent Square. His second novel, The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida, was announced as the winner of the Booker Prize 2022 on October 17 at a ceremony in London. Third, Andrea Wang and Jason Chin. Andrea Wang, author of Nyan Monster and Magic Ramen. The story of Momofuku Ando holds an MS in Environmental Science and an MFA in Creative Writing for Young People. Illustrated by Jason Chin. Is inspired by her experience growing up in rural Ohio as a child of Chinese immigrants. And that would be all. Thank you so much for listening.